This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Audible. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, November 17th, 2022. We're in Hawaii, in beautiful Maui, for the Snapdragon Summit. And I have Ziad Asghar here with me of Qualcomm to talk Snapdragon 8 Gen 2.
Thank you for having me. Always excited to talk about all the tech.
I'm super stoked that you're here because always hearing it from the horse's mouth is the best.
Indeed.
So, I'm going to be going over with Andrew later on in the show about some of the things that stood out for us. But I kind of want to get from Qualcomm,
Sure.
What do you think are the key things that really bring this chip to the forefront of technology right now?
Would love to talk about it. So I think this is a true tech marvel in every sense of the word. We have pushed every technology bar to a higher level.
Yeah.
So let's start, for example, with the camera.
Okay.
See, you're using the cameras, of course. Very happy to see that on the Snapdragon. But what we wanted to do is, like every consumer survey that we do, consumers want a better experience. So what we did with this one is actually we have integrated a hardware segmentation capability. So at this frame right now, we can actually figure out exactly where the cloth is, where the skin is, where the glass is, where everything
background, and if like you're the beach or the sky,
exactly,
or the
vegetation. So you can enhance
buildings.
each one of them the right way for the picture to turn out exactly how you want it.
Right.
And then because it's a hardware engine, you can actually do it for video as well.
Right.
So
that's, I think, the big differentiator, because we've had segmentation on, in imaging
Exactly.
pipelines on various phones, whether it be Snapdragon or others, for a while now.
That's right.
But I think the key here is you're talking real time in hardware on the viewfinder while you're recording 8K video or something, right? Which is like
amazing.
Amazing.
That's right. And along with that, what you're able to do now is that we actually call it the cognitive ISP.
Okay.
Which means that actually we have created a very special hexagon direct link, allows you to take the camera data, take it to the AI engine, and be able to process it and add every effect, every capability imaginable. You can look into the darkest rooms and be able to see through it.
Right.
You can create depth out of it to be able to create bokeh effects and all. And all of those things you can actually see through your viewfinder.
So you're actually kind of creating a shortcut inside the chip for the ISP to talk to the AI engine.
Exactly.
Which is a major new feature,
Absolutely.
right? And then you've got a whole bunch of other accelerated features since we're on imaging.
That's right.
That stood out. Correct me and add if I forget any.
No.
There's automatic horizon stabilization, right?
That's
so
right.
the horizon will always be perfect. I'm so picky about that. You have no idea. I will edit my photos after the fact. If I see that the horizon is a little off, I'm very good at visualizing when things are off like that, and it drives me nuts.
Absolutely.
So having the idea that a phone will do it for me is nice. Also, you're doing fun with bokeh, right?
That's
so
right.
You're able to change the shape of the bokeh. Again, we've seen this before.
Yes.
Even on very basic Snapdragon chipsets.
That's
Like
not
Nokia has
all
done
hardware.
it
Yeah.
for years now, I think on the 400 and 600 series. But
Right.
this is happening in real time. You can
That's
do it
right.
video now. You
That's
do it in
right.
all kinds of places.
Just like you said, you can have this beautiful sunset that we see in Hawaii every day. And then that horizon is tilted.
Yeah,
and
it
every
just
time you
ruins
look
it.
at that picture and you're like, I messed it up. Well, the phone takes care of it for you, right? It's amazing.
Yeah.
And then at the same time, those bokeh effects you're talking about, that all those things that are, in the depth field, you can actually change what they look like, those light sources. You can make them look horizontal, like square or circular or heart-shaped or whatever people want to do.
Right.
So now those selfies that people love to take, you can even add another factor to them that's amazing.
Yeah. And it's cool because now you're not just giving, in terms of like fake bokeh, right? Like if the camera sensor is small, you're not going to get natural depth of field. So the selfie cameras generally don't have that much natural depth of field. So what you're saying basically is that now you cannot just do a fake, depth perception. You're actually able to adjust it, I think. That's
right.
the thing. Like you can go from f16 or 14 to f1.4 or something.
We can do all the adjustments.
Super range.
Exactly.
And then you can make the bokeh shape a star, heart, whatever it might be.
Exactly. See, that was the whole idea. The technology that we have, because of the augmentation with AI, no DSLR can do that for you.
No, of course not.
Right? We've left.
But that's been the case forever. I mean, I feel like mobile photography has its like inherent advantage simply
Indeed.
because of that.
Indeed.
Any other, since we're on imaging,
Yeah.
features I might be forgetting that are specifically using that AI and that real time?
So we also have basically an always sensing camera in there.
Oh, that's
and
right.
It solves another set of problems for you with a small, basically a dual core AI engine that's on a separate, what we call our sensing hub. So another key pain point that I have personally is if you are like inclined or laying down, sometimes what happens is your phone keeps going between portrait and landmark.
Yeah.
Right?
So it can
Landscape
just detect
mode.
that. And
now
lock
it detects your face, knows exactly what orientation to keep it in, and you have a far better experience on it. Similarly, another thing that also is able to do is, for example, you're here, you're entering your nice mobile banking password, and well, that happens to notice that there is a face
Person
right behind you.
Yeah.
It can basically warn you about that.
Right.
So features like that actually make your data even more secure on the device is another focus.
And it's completely separate from the actual main processor. Like it's just a little thing that runs at the same time
Indeed.
in its own little universe, so it doesn't impact the processing performance of your
Not at
phone
all. So
anyway.
extremely low power. It's not identifying faces. It's just recognizing that there is a face, not what the face is,
Right.
but just pointing out that there is a face. And if there is a face, it's a 1. If there is not, it's a 0. And based on that information, you can do a lot of such great use cases.
So walk us through some of the other changes. Maybe I'll go through CPU, GPU, and a bunch of other things.
Sure.
CPU, the big change is you've rearranged a number of efficiency cores versus
performance.
Performance,
Yes.
thank you. So what was the decision behind that? Could you tell us a little more about
Great
it?
question. So, see, what we are really focused on is to be able to get to the best experience possible. And as we work through, I have a large team under me that focuses on gaming experience.
Right.
We call the Snapdragon Studios. And basically what we've been doing is working with all the game engines. And one of the key pain points that was coming from them is that with the new way the games are written, you want more than 4 performance or very capable threads from the CPU.
Right.
To be able to give you even better gaming performance. So what we've done in this one is we have one X3 core, we have 2 A715s, we have 2 A710s.
Okay.
And then 3 510s, the efficiency cores.
So you've gone from 4 to 3 on the efficiency, right?
Exactly. So now the reason why did we do the 710, 715? Well, there's this transformation that's happening in moving the ecosystem from 32 bits to 64 bits. The 715s cannot run 32-bit applications.
Right.
So if you go all 715...
Then you're screwed for the old apps.
Exactly. You're messing up the legacy apps. We don't want that. So that's why we think we have come up with absolutely the right configuration to be able to make sure that while this transition is happening, we can support 32-bit apps, we can support 64-bit apps, and give a very good experience to the user on use cases like gaming.
Cool. The big news, if I remember from the GPU side, was the ray tracing, of course, which we've seen on hardware acceleration for PCs and consoles for a while, but is only now coming to mobile. And it's funny because the demos are over the top always. It's like, oh my God, look at the difference. But I think what's going to matter more is when we start seeing it in games and it becomes a subtle thing where you're like, oh, look at that. Like that feels real, like shadows that are like a little bit more, like kind of like diffuse. And I mean, I'm all for like, the crazy demos, but I feel like, I think when it's going to really hit us is when we see it in a real game and you're like, oh, wow, look at how good this looks.
Totally.
But we can't quite put our finger on it,
Totally agree. And when it will not be there, you'll notice it
Exactly.
now, right? So basically the part that I'm really excited about over here is this is a capability that until a couple years ago, you needed to have a desktop plugged in to be able to get.
It's crazy, right?
Right? We have been able to do it from a ground up ray tracing engine development perspective, brought this to the palm of your hand, and you're able to stay under that 5-foot envelope and still be able to get all the gaming experience, plus this amazing mirroring, shadowing, and lighting effects. Literally, each and every ray of light following through and giving you realistic, lighting and all those benefits.
Nice.
And you can do more than 10 billion intersections of light with the way we designed this engine, all under the 5-watt envelope.
That's incredible. I mean, 5 watt is like nothing to start with. And I think this is it's exciting.
And I had one more, right?
Oh, yeah?
So now we actually have real games, right? Some people are talking about ray tracing. We have multiple games coming from multiple OEMs and partners.
Yeah, you showed them on stage.
That will be available at launch. So this is not slideware. This is absolutely real, and we're super excited about it.
Wow, very cool. All right, let's talk. We see with the GPU, CPU, ISP. There is there's all connectivity stuff, right? So there is Wi-Fi 7. You've got dual Bluetooth. Let's talk about all that. real quick. So I think to me, Wi-Fi 7, like, it's kind of one of those future-proofing things.
Yep.
And of course, when you start looking at Snapdragon AR2 Gen 1, potentially accessorizing with glasses and stuff, then you really need that fast connectivity, right?
Absolutely.
But I also think that it goes beyond that, because I feel like, as we're going more wireless for things like us creators, like I'm recording video here, right? Or recording audio with another phone. I got a laptop with other audio. I'm going to have to synchronize it all. I'm shuffling data through USB a lot, right?
Yeah.
And right now, I wouldn't think of it doing any other way because it's reliable and it's fast.
Right.
And with Wi-Fi 6, I can, but it's not great. I think what people don't realize is with Wi-Fi 7, we're getting closer to the portless phone in a way, right? Because we're going to be at a place where you can just have that massive, multi-gigabyte, like 40, 50, 60 gigabyte file sitting on your phone for recorded like an hour, 4K, 60.
You can take it
and
like
just
this.
Bang over to your laptop without having to plug in.
That's right.
And yes, I mean, it's not going to speed up your internet because it's way faster than that already.
Indeed.
But, anything you do on all your devices on that network are going to be impacted. And sure, you're not going to have a Wi-Fi 7 router right away, right? But eventually you will.
You will.
Is that kind of how you guys see it?
This is a great way to do it, right? Number one, the AR story that you told is absolutely the right one. But I think the other key thing we've seen happen is during the COVID days.
Right.
Right? Everybody has been starved for bandwidth.
Uh-huh.
Well, that's why Wi-Fi 6 adoption was so fast. And that's why we think Wi-Fi 7 will be pretty fast too.
Okay.
And I think that's why we have the router side also. We have this side too.
Yeah.
And you can do things like you talk about large files and you start to think differently where you don't talk about taking it via USB. Now you literally can say, hey, transfer my file over there and poof, it's gone.
Yeah, or if you're on a laptop and you have a NAS in the corner, you can actually do video editing live on the NAS now without being wired in on Ethernet or something.
Exactly.
But I think the other thing that I feel like, people are not realizing is that having overhead bandwidth is valuable too. Absolutely. It's like, when you get a gigabit fiber connection, symmetric at home, which I have, it's not so much that, you're going to use that 1 gigabit, but the fact that you can reliably get 300 megabits, like solid, sustained
is very
for an
useful.
Entire hour without any interruption, that's where you see the difference. And then you have 2 or 3 people doing that, and then it becomes an issue, right?
And now what people are also realizing is there's so much going on in your home, right? You got security cameras running.
Oh, yeah.
NAS is syncing up. You basically might have a connected thermostat and all, right? All of those things are basically tapping for bandwidth at some point or another.
It all adds up.
Yeah.
And then, for 2 people watch on 2 different 4K TVs at the same time, right?
Exactly.
So, yeah. So, tell us quickly a little bit more about, I know there's some AI engine stuff built into the 5G now. You're doing beamforming right in there in the 5G modem, which is crazy.
So basically, I always talk about it that I look at AI as this horizontal technology that it goes across all the technologies.
Yeah, for sure.
Makes your audio better, makes your video better, makes your camera better. Well, now it makes your modem better too. Because a lot of those things that could have been hardwired in the past, at a high level, at a philosophy level, now you can basically apply AI to configure them exactly based on what kind of channel condition you are in. So you can do beamforming, you can do channel quality indication, you can do a lot of such routine things, but now you optimize them based on the channel environment around you. That changes the experience completely. And that's why now already our stellar modem can even do better. You can get in signals at times when you would not have been able to in the past, because of application of AI. And maybe just to add a little bit more, on the AI side, we've gone crazy on 8 Gen 2. So I'm quite pleased with that because we've enabled integer 4 processing.
Oh yeah, that's a big deal too, right? You're giving developers an option on how to best benefit from that AI.
Exactly.
Because ultimately it's a finite resource.
That's right. So people keep asking me, what does this mean? I'm like, look, when the model gets trained in the cloud, it's trained in 32 bits. That's a lot of bits. Now, if you could shrink it down to 4 bits, it means if I have this much compute in my device, instead of being able to run one model, if I can run 8 models concurrently, well, you got a lot more AI going. But what's the challenge? The challenge has been getting accuracy right.
Right.
So that's why we developed a full Qualcomm AI Studio, has all the tools, has everything for you to be able to make sure that your accuracy is still maintained as you go from higher bit widths to 4-bit and still be able to get the power performance benefits.
And you can test it for yourself and make sure, and maybe 4 bits is not enough and you'll go to 8-bit. But at least you can try it.
Yes.
And hopefully if the accuracy stays, your model can run on 4-bit. And then boom, you're
exactly right.
So that's pretty awesome. I used to work in video games as a developer, so I can relate to some of that stuff.
Nice.
Of having to shuffle around with different integer and floating
to
point
make it
types.
fit, right? Yeah, exactly.
And my audience is pretty tech savvy, so they'll get it.
Nice.
But tell me if we missed anything that we should just talk about real quick before we wrap up.
I think one of the other key things we brought in is if you think about the technologies that are lighting up metaverse. So we also enabled spatial audio this time around.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah,
That's a
for
really
sure.
cool one because, I mean, you can imagine in metaverse, you got your avatar on one side and you got your friend on the other side. You want to know where that sound is coming from.
Oh, yeah.
And right, spatial audio allows you to do that. And we're doing dynamic spatial audio, which means that if you move your head, we're able to track that and adjust the sound waves around you to still be able to give you that same experience. Along with that, with superb AI, along with that best-in-class camera capability, and products like AR2. And essentially now we're putting together all the pieces.
Yeah, it's an ecosystem, right?
It's
I mean,
an
if you have
ecosystem.
Snapdragon sound chip equipped earbuds, headphones, you get a better experience.
That's right.
Because it integrates well with the solution. So yeah, no. I mean, obviously I realize you guys are doing that. It's just, I'm trying to think of like specifically on the 8 Gen 2. But yeah, the spatial audio is great. I love that you have dual Bluetooth too, which I think enable all kinds of new functionalities, which is really helpful.
Yes.
So I mean, it's
It's a powerhouse.
I feel like the thing is always interesting to me. Every time I'm at this summit, I feel the same. It's like, it's better and it's, pretty impressive. A lot of people have put a lot of effort and energy into it. I recognize that. But I'm like, it seems like just, it's like incremental. But then you actually start using the devices. And when the experiences hit that benefit from that technology, that's when you're like, oh, okay. And so I think we're at that stage right now where we're all like, okay, the phones are coming. Let's wait till we can test them out. But I'm excited about that.
We're very excited.
The rumors are, and I'm not fishing, that Xiaomi folks is going to have their phone out on the 1st of December. So that's very soon. So whether that's true or not, I don't know. But that means that today, like we're about 12 days away from a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 phone. So that's it. Thanks for being on the podcast. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
So Andrew, we're here now.
Yeah.
We've done a little time with the Qualcomm folks. They give us their spiel. What's your take?
Less of a spiel, that's for sure. I like that juxtaposition, though. It's a good combination.
I mean, just so you know, folks, obviously we're in Hawaii for the Snapdragon Summit. That's why I interviewed Qualcomm execs just now. So obviously we have some opinions. We have some thoughts. We've been briefed on all the things. What's your take on this? Do you feel like, are you excited? Is it just evolutionary? Are just like yawning? Like what's...
Well, the interesting thing that I saw, I mean, if we just want to start with the 8 Gen 2.
Yeah, I think that's the key one here, right?
The interesting thing is, obviously, they talked about very specific things in the imaging realm. I know that's where you want to live. But, they were like, look, we are here to support all of the top things that you're going to see in this coming year in terms of 8K HDR video, 200 megapixel sensors, 1-inch sensors. We have a dedicated AI link between the ISP and the AI engine. Like, I felt like that was probably the most compelling thing, only because all the other stuff is so evolutionary, where it's just like, sure, we have, a slightly different core layout and there's AI everywhere. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that to me the key kind of like, other than imaging, which I could do an entire show about. Yeah. I mean, there are some good things in there, but a lot of it are features that we've seen in imaging before, but they're now running in real time in the viewfinder. And I think that's important because a lot of these features in the past, you didn't see them until you shot.
Right.
And now having like the bokeh stuff happening in real time.
All the segmentation.
The segmentation, I think, is the bigger one. And I think on an AI level, I think a lot of the way they've kind of structured the internals of the chip to optimize the AI, the way some parts of the chipset can talk to other parts of the chipset to kind of optimize the AI use, I think is really interesting. And of course, we're going to see some improvements in performance and battery life. And to me, that's also good because like we always want more. We want faster, we want longer battery, right?
And I mean, I want to see one thing that was pointed out to me when, of course, they always show we're 90% more efficient and whatever, it's 5 times more powerful and uses the tenth the power, whatever. A lot of those comparisons were against 8 Gen 1, not 1 Plus.
Oh, that's a good point.
And so, I mean, we saw solid gains just from the Plus.
Just from the switch to basically going to TSMC.
Yeah.
So I'm a little worried that...
So I'm wondering, like, how much of that, like, where does the Plus land in between 1 and 2?
Exactly. I'm worried about that a little bit. I also am worried, like, did they announce that they're doing this with TSMC again?
I don't remember them saying that.
So because there are rumors, this is I don't think related to Snapdragon Summit, and it might be rumors that happened before the summit. I just remember reading the news throughout the week sometime and seeing something say Qualcomm might go back to using Samsung. And I mean, after I've seen the gains, and I know MediaTek uses TSMC as well, and it really works well for them. So I'm like, I don't want to say Samsung can't do it as well. Obviously, they're a pretty mighty chip maker, fab company. And I don't want to take that away from them. But at the same time, I'm like, clearly from Gen 1 to plus Gen 1, we've seen such an improvement. Yeah. I kind of hope they stay with TSMC.
Yeah, I hope so as well.
But anyway, the other features that stand out to me are, ray tracing on the GPU in hardware now. Of course, MediaTek did it last week. I think this is par for the course at this point.
Yeah.
It's a nice demo.
And I have to, I don't know, if you saw any of my tweets, I'm not the biggest, these ray tracing demos are a little bit much at this point. Maybe it's because, we cover the computing space so much at DT that, ray tracing's been just the thing with desktop gaming and GPUs, and it's just okay, I think I've had enough of seeing the most reflective water you've ever seen.
Even I, who doesn't cover much on the gaming side and the PC side, I'm like, I kind of roll my eyes. I'm like, okay, great, you did it. It's on mobile now. But we know the demos, we've seen them. Yes, it's important. I mean, I personally think the best thing about ray tracing is not so much the reflections on water or whatever. I like the shadows, how they're soft. I like how you have a light source that shines through some sort of structure or something that casts the right shadows everywhere.
Things don't have to look like they're basically studio lit.
Exactly. And I like that. It gives you kind of a bit of obviously more realistic, but it's also kind of a softer vibe. It doesn't kind of sear your eyes as much as traditional games that don't have ray tracing.
And that's why I'm sure I'll appreciate it when it just kind of becomes a thing that's a little integrated and you just notice it. Because right now the demos are obviously going to they took that slider and they moved it all the way up.
Those demos are ridiculous. And I just want to say they were just as ridiculous at MediaTek last week. It's not just Qualcomm.
No.
Okay.
Gaming demos in general.
There's that. There's ray tracing. That's a big deal. Of course, power saving, performance improvements, ISP, image processing. But I always feel with Qualcomm is that they're we are an art supply store.
Sure.
We give you a palette of tools
Look at all these things
you can use as an OEM to use our chipsets more effectively for your imaging pipeline. But half the time, the manufacturers don't use it or take a long time to implement it or whatever.
We've seen so many of those demos showing... not the level of segmentation and layering that we saw yesterday.
That's more than before.
Yeah, but we have seen that type of demo.
Yeah.
So many times. It's okay, it can segment this out and we can apply different lighting effects. And, I obviously loved the little demo of, and you should too, of the reflection in the glasses.
Oh, that was cool.
Where they showed they could remove the reflection in the glasses selectively and leave everything else lit the same. It's that's amazing, but who is going to use it?
Yeah, when am I going to get a phone in my hand that has a setting that I can turn on that does that?
Right, remove the reflectivity.
Right, because that's not a setting I necessarily want to have on all the time, right? Because it does look a bit weird. If you're used to seeing somebody, with slight reflections in their glasses, all of a sudden, it's they almost have no lenses.
They're just clear, yeah.
It's a bit weird. But I do think there's some good stuff in there. I think that the horizon leveling, that we've seen that as well before, but we've never seen it in real time.
Yeah.
Where it's literally you've moved the phone like this and the whole thing just stays. And that's cool. How useful is that? I mean, it's I suppose
companies have to commercialize
GoPro's been doing it for a while. So this is just,
But that's also something that you start to get into when we're looking at 200 megapixel sensors.
Right.
You can start to do all this. That's one of those things where it doesn't really need to be a setting necessarily. You can just throw that on there and you can always be cropping in just a little bit and just rotating it a little bit.
Yeah.
And depending on the subtlety, it could be really nice.
No, I think, it would definitely help if you're trying to shoot some kind of action video when you want to try to keep the horizon stable enough so that it seems okay. I think for that, and that's why GoPro has it. But I feel overall, there's some interesting things in there. The better improved 200 megapixel support is going to be a big deal because we're going to see a ton of phones
that's
that
just
way.
going to
Like, so, right now it's a little iffy, the 200 megapixel support on on the existing chipsets. And, so I feel like we're going to see improvements, but it's a little thing they announced, but this IMX 800 and 989 from Sony, which are two pretty good quality 50 megapixel sensor. The 989 is a 1-inch sensor, which is currently on the Xiaomi 12S Ultra, the only phone that really has a non-cropped 1-inch sensor. And it's coming to a Vivo phone very soon. That sensor, both of these sensors support what's called QDOL, which is quad, like it's basically HDR for video, but it's using 4 exposures per frame in real time, up to like 60 frames per second or something. Right. So it means you can shoot HDR video without having to be in an HDR mode. Like you don't have to worry about like, is this Dolby Vision or HDR 10 or whatever? You just like shoot, kind of like you shoot a photo today. And it's just into the file. Looks natural and you get good contrast between dark parts and light parts, and it's doing it in real time. And that's something that's supported in hardware on the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 and is available for these two sensors. Those two sensors are not very common yet because, the 1-inch one is particularly expensive. This IMX 800 is on the Honor 70. It's the only phone I know that has it. Maybe we're going to see more phones that now that Snapdragon supports that feature, and then they can like say, "Oh, look, we're doing this." But this is something Sony made the sensor to do that needed some hardware support to make it happen. So
and those are the like rising tide kind of moments that come out of Qualcomm. And I love the art supply store. Like
that's basically what it is.
That's what comes from this. Is they're like, oh wow, okay, now I don't have to do a custom integration of any sort to get this great sensor, and like, okay. That's going to be beneficial.
So I think that's kind of what I'm excited about on the imaging front is once the manufacturers take advantage of some of these functionalities, you're going to see basically a very real preview of what your photo is going to look like in your viewfinder, which is not something you necessarily get right now.
No.
And then, ray tracing. There's also some improvements to kind of like ambient computing where you're like, it's constantly able to, run the cameras, but they did more around that and it's more secure, they say. I mean,
those are the things that feel the most like really speculative demos because those things require so much more integration with the entire operating system and like the presence detection stuff, some of the security things where they showed demos of, what is it, as soon as the camera sees another person in the frame, like coming up behind you, all of a sudden it like, whatever, pauses your video or puts you in do not disturb and like all sorts of stuff like that. Like that is not like coming in the Galaxy S23. You know what I mean? Like those are things that OEMs would need to take a very deliberate set of steps to implement those.
For sure. I kind of like the idea that if somebody's looking over your shoulder, your screen, blurs or whatever. Like privacy is important, and this happens to us all the time. Especially those of us who are dealing with embargoes, on an airplane or something. Who knows who you're sitting next to?
We want that stuff to be shut down. Yeah. Those things are pretty interesting, but and the sensing hub stuff, and I mean, for me, it falls in the same category as all of the connectivity stuff. But they're just like, we give you literally every connectivity standard. And every radio, every band and it's like, cool, you just don't have to think about it anymore. Like this is going to have
Wi-Fi 7.
Wi-Fi 7. It's going to have every single
5G
Bluetooth support.
band.
Every
Wi-Fi
dual
band. Bluetooth too now, which is nice.
And more lossless and aptX and
all the Snapdragon sound stuff.
Exactly.
I mean, again, this is very much the art supply store again. Like you can have this codec or you can have this codec. We've got them. They're in hardware. Go nuts. I do feel, though, that this is actually a pretty exciting step, the Wi-Fi 7. It's going to take a while before we get Wi-Fi 7 routers and stuff. I think CS is going to be the big Wi-Fi 7 brouhaha. But having a phone that you're going to keep for 2-3 years that has that in it is going to be a nice feature to have, right?
Because especially if you're listening to this, you're probably going to be getting a Wi-Fi 7 router within the next
Sooner
2 years.
Than later,
And of course, it's on the router part. It's just going to be one of those things where you're just going to go get a new router and it's going to have Wi-Fi 7.
Boom.
Just like I, just happened to end up getting a Wi-Fi 6 router. It's like, you're just going to go about that. And no, your phone's going to be a little faster.
Yeah, and more importantly, if you have a laptop with Wi-Fi 7 later, then you can transfer files between your devices. Like you might not need to use USB connectivity anymore. Like you can AirDrop or whatever the equivalent is on your platform very quickly, which I think is actually good because, we're barreling down a road where the future is portless for the phones. Like it's clear, right?
Yep.
Like, so, I mean, how long will that take? I mean, it's already been done, I think it was Vivo or Oppo. Somebody did it a few years back as a concept. But I think that, when I see what Apple's doing with MagSafe, like I'm wondering...
continuity and
I think
AirDrop.
ZTE did a MagSafe compatible back on one of their phones without advertising as such because they didn't want to get sued. But like I'm surprised that nobody else is just kind of adopting that, even if they're like, maybe they're afraid of Apple. But if all of them started doing it, like if all the new phones next year coming out, the flagships, all have
the circle on it.
The circle on it in the back. What is Apple going to do? Huh?
I know it's a circle of magnets. It doesn't seem
like what are they going to do about it? Like you can't really like, especially when the phones are out. Like what are you going to do? I think that Android should jump on that because the reason I'm bringing this up is because I think that that's where Apple is going. They're going to give us USB-C for a couple of years, but once they can get Wi-Fi 7 on their laptops and their phones, which is another generation or two away, AirDrop is going to be way more effective than actually transferring even like 4K video files, whether USB. So you're going to be with a portless phone makes sense because MagSafe, if you can accelerate the charging speed through the same standard, like the same interface, imagine a MacBook in the future that in the two back corners of the screen has MagSafe support. Sure. And you can charge it at 66 watts or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I kind of think that's where we're headed slowly, whoever does it. So I feel like Wi-Fi 7, right now we're kind of like, what's the use case? Your internet at home is probably not as fast as Wi-Fi 7 anyway.
And that's always the argument against.
But I feel like we're going to start seeing more and more wireless, support that is taking away some cables for us because of Wi-Fi 7. So, What else does they announce on radio? I don't know. I think that was it. More 5G stuff.
More 5G
More
stuff.
efficient. AI beamforming as well. They have basically better reception on 5G radios because they use AI. But they have AI implemented right in the radio. Yeah. Which I think is cool.
Dual SIM, dual active for 5G connections.
Yeah.
Which is like, okay. That's another art supply store thing.
Totally is. We're not going to see that on too many phones. MediaTek's been doing that for a while, actually. That's because their markets are very dual SIM heavy.
On the connectivity front, that was
it.
That was it.
I think that's really it, guys. I mean, the way I feel about it every year that I come here, or every year that even any manufacturer comes out with a new chipset is like, oh, cool. Like, I'm not blown away. It's very evolutionary. What really matters is when we get the phones in our hands and we start testing them and go like, oh, that feature is cool. And it wasn't possible before because of this chip. Right. And that's when you're like, ta-da, you get the moment where you're like, yeah, this is exactly what I needed, right? Yeah. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, the big thing for me, again, every time we come here is like, it sucks that we take like this amount of innovation for granted. Yeah. But like we kind of do at this point because like Qualcomm just keeps killing it. Yeah. In this, especially at the top end, like every single year, and you're just like, okay, we're just going to have these great chips available and they're going to provide all these crazy features. Like, I don't know, maybe we're just a little spoiled.
I mean, we are, but I mean, at the same time, we've seen it where it didn't matter some years, right? Like, in the past, the Plus chips were just such a minor improvement that this year we're like, wait, what just happened? Like, it was such a major improvement. We're like, it almost felt to me like the 8 Plus Gen 1 was what the 8 Gen 1 should have been, and they just couldn't do it. Mm-hmm. And they're like, oh, perfect, we need to have a Plus chip. That'll be it, right? It's kind of easy for them. But at the same time, I think we can't deny, like, there's hundreds of people working on this day in, day out for years. Like, it's all a culmination. Like, they announced Orion, the next CPU core architecture, and that's not coming until next year. But they've probably been working on that for 2 years now. Yeah. So.
Yeah, that's not even going to be actually announced until next year and made available to partners. So we're probably talking devices at some point in 2024.
Yeah, who knows? Yeah. And again, is it going to be the same as when Snapdragon 808 and 810 came out, where they went to, like, they got rid of their own cores and used the ARM core, and the performance wasn't that great, and the heat was a problem. Like, I'm not saying, like, I know Qualcomm knows what they're doing, but when there's a radical change of architecture like that, I'm always like,
They knew what they were doing back then, too. And
no, but I think that you always get that sometimes you get that first gen product that needs to happen for the future to happen, but it's not that good because something is not perfect. Like, perfect example of that, Galaxy S20 Ultra.
Yeah.
Right? Look at the 21.
Yeah.
Great. 22, awesome. 20, it had so many problems, right?
Together.
But you have to give Samsung kudos for being the first to say, oh yeah, we're going to make a phone with 2 telephotos and a 108 megapixel sensor. You know, like, yeah. And then, but then the next year, they nailed it. And so maybe it'll be like that. I hope not. I kind of, feel like Qualcomm hopefully learned that lesson from the 808 and 810. That was kind of a bit of a dip in the 800 series. But anyway, the other chip, I mean, there's so much that was announced here. I'm not going to go through everything. But the thing that kind of interests me the most, and I put it in the topics for you, is the AR2 Gen 1.
Yep.
Right? And I think the reason for that is because I'm much more of a believer in AR than VR. Like, I get it. VR is fun and important. Some people love playing games. Some people actually work out with VR. Kudos if you do. I'm not going to take your fun and excitement away from you, but it's not for me simply because I feel claustrophobic. I feel not nauseous because I'm not that bad, but I just don't enjoy it. Every time even the highest quality VR I've ever tried has never been a fun experience for me, and I don't see myself working out and playing games. But at the same time, that being said, I feel like, it's like AR is really going to be cool because, we have smartwatches that can give us ambient computing, augment our phone experience. Why not have glasses that augment our phone experience? And what's exciting to me about the AR2 chipset, the Gen 1, is that it really is an augmentation of your phone. Like, it relies on the phone. It uses Wi-Fi 7, actually. But the way they designed it is that so that, the problem with a lot of these AR glasses, they've been a little bulky because you get the battery on one side and the processor on the other side, but you get all these sensors and all the wires for all these sensors. So what they did is they kind of like created it's really multiple chips that are designed to minimize the number of wires and to make the form factor more like, I mean, these glasses that I'm wearing are pretty big, and that would possibly work in these glasses.
And they showed, I mean, I have the little diagram up, but it's one chip
in the middle
the bridge,
that gets all the sensors.
And then one on both sides.
Correct.
Both arms.
And it's really smart because there's very little cables or wiring going through. And it's very power efficient, right? They do a lot of edge computing stuff where like some stuff like motion, head tracking and like eye tracking is all done locally. There's no connection. It's all processed. And then you kind of get that bigger data once it's processed out to the other chips and then out to the phone. And I don't know, I think that it's very clever. And it's the first time I've really been like, we might actually see a product from the Chinese makers, especially, right? That might actually be the first thing that we go like, okay, this is viable, right? And that's kind of why I'm excited. Like they're giving essentially in that our supply store, they're giving a set of tools now that let the OEMs make some AR glasses that don't suck.
I don't have any indication of what kind of price levels we're talking here.
It's going to be expensive at first.
I imagine it's
$1,000 I figured for a pair of glasses like that. The biggest question is the display technology, right? Like what they show is, is the way they architect with their chips. But like we saw the Niantic demo, right? There was a Niantic device and it was still a little bulkier because it had extra cameras and you could tell the displays were taking up a bit more space. So I think you're going to see different implementations. But I would love, coming from my time at Pebble and stuff where really we were focusing on notifications and just augmenting the phone use. I would love a set of glasses I can wear that just pops stuff up when it matters. And I can kind of like, in the same way as I can filter my notifications, I can filter like, well, how much level of overlay do I want? What do I want to overlay, right?
Very minimal, hopefully.
I mean, some people will want more. Maybe when you're at a conference, you want face recognition on. So, that person you met that one time that you forgot the name of, but they're in your address book or something, it can recognize them and it pops up their name. And you're like, oh, yeah. Because that I'm bad with names. That's kind of a holy grail for me. If you ever meet me once, like make sure you say your name multiple times because otherwise I'm going to be forgetting. But anyway, the point is, I think this is kind of like, in a car, imagine you drive a classic car, right? Because we're both car people.
Yeah.
You drive a classic car, stick shift. You don't want to like add some ugly 7-inch touchscreen thing to it. Like imagine now you put your glasses on,
and information,
you have your phone in your pocket and it's giving you directions.
Yeah.
Your car is unscathed. You don't have to worry about
That's actually
anything.
a good, I mean, even if you just think about cars for a second, how manufacturers have found a really nice balance for head-up displays.
Yeah.
Some have gone a little overkill, but like for the most part, it's like they understand that is they found the right amount of information to have glanceable and available right in front of you because they have a very narrow task. Obviously, like you don't need the world, when you're just driving down the road. But I think that taking the same philosophy behind AR glasses would be really helpful. Like just nail a couple of parts and let the technology catch up.
For that, it would be great. Mini, a few years back, like BMW Group, like 5 or 6 years ago, invited me to a thing in San Francisco where they had a Mini Cooper and this pair, it was Snapdragon powered as well. But this is years ago, and they were pretty light and small considering what they were, but they were a pair of AR glasses and you put them on in the car and they would basically act as a heads-up display for the car. And there was a little charging dock in the car, so you could leave them there. But what the coolest part was is that, when you're parking, you don't want to curb your wheels. Of course, most cars nowadays have, 360 views. So you can do overhead, you can see, or they have the rear view mirror will tilt down so you can see. But what was cool is they did an AR thing where it would show you a camera view from the rear view mirror through the footwell.
Okay.
So cool. You actually saw your wheel through the metal, through the sheet metal.
Right. Make my car transparent.
You'd be like, okay, I'm not touching the curb. That was like super cool, little things like that. Okay. And it was head tracking, right? So the heads up display was always kind of in front of you.
That would be even better now with 360 cameras on cars. Yeah. I mean, you would be able to basically make the whole thing transparent through your glasses.
So now imagine that it's not just specific for the car, that it's a device that you wear every day for your everyday stuff. And, there you go. Cool stuff.
Yeah, it's neat.
Look at it this way. I sleep without glasses. Obviously, I wake up, first thing I do is put my glasses on. And then I reach for my phone to see my notification. Yeah. Wouldn't it be great if my Google ecosystem, because I know Google would do it right,
of course,
aggregates all that data and says, in a corner I can see you have, just keep it lightweight. You have 12 critical notifications, 13 that are not. Here's the time. Here's the first meeting you have, and maybe here's your stocks or whatever it might be, right? Like if you're a person with stocks, like that, or the weather, maybe, right? That's it. Give me that, right? That's all I need,
right?
And then then I can now pick up my phone and drill into it.
And then for the vast majority of the time, they're just glasses, and
or,
they're not bothering.
Or what if I'm not even seeing anything, and I go into my room and I say, I'm not going to say the keyword here on the show, but I say, and then it instead of verbally answering to me because maybe my kid's asleep, it pops in on my glasses. Yeah. Like I'm asking for the weather and it pops the little icon, the card, the Google card. So that's kind of like the scenarios that I see.
A lot of the scenario, and it's a lot of the scenarios that we've all kind of drooled over. Yeah. But now when you look at things like this, you're like, this could actually
because now this is the closest thing we've seen to a practical solution.
Yeah. That isn't a giant headset or hardware, physically tethered to a phone or, obviously supremely limited in terms of battery life because, past chips were not efficient.
For sure. So, yeah.
We're talking about a set of 4 nanometer chips here with minimal interconnect, just doing things wirelessly.
Yeah, and I think that's the other thing is because the phone is still doing the heavy lifting. Yeah, you're balancing the battery load between two devices, right?
Right.
And the phone is already designed to be super efficient, so it can actually handle a little bit more load. Look, Snapdragon AR2 Gen 1, check it out. It's pretty cool. I'll put some links in the show notes to your write-ups on digital trends.
They did list companies that that they're saying they're already partnering with. So Lenovo, LG, Nreal, Oppo, Pico, Rokid, I don't know, Rokid, Sharp, TCL, Tencent, Vuzix, Xiaomi. So wow, the mix of, obviously a couple of those brands are already in the heads-up display
field,
glasses field,
like
and then
and
then you've got the the big endemic manufacturers. So
speaking of which, there was a plethora of partners announcements now.
Oh my goodness,
8 Gen 2, right? Going back to phones now. And it looks like the Xiaomi 13 series is going to be the first. And I found an article here that with a leak that shows the phone. I'll put it in the show notes. It's on Tech Radar. Basically, it's exactly what you expect. It's the numbered phone by Xiaomi, which is going to be coming a regular and a light and a pro version. And it's going to be coming out. It looks like December 1st is the rumor right now. Of course, Snapdragon 8 Gen 2.
And this is the classic move.
They're always trying to be first.
Trying to one-up them, each other. And we're like, oh, yeah, okay. Generally, we say these products will be available in the next year. But it's like, especially now with Snapdragon Summit this year being like 2 weeks earlier, they're like, how about December 1st?
I mean, last year, you've noticed the last couple of years,
the chip
right?
wasn't even available.
It's actually coming. They're coming out earlier and earlier, right?
Yeah.
Last year, I think we had sometime mid to late December was the first, and I think it was Moto or Xiaomi. I can't remember, one of the two. And then for the 8 Gen 1, and then this year it's like a December 1st. And I think a lot of this happening because of Chinese New Year, right? It comes up. It's late January this year, so it's actually even earlier. And, for them, they need these phones out in time for the holidays, their holidays. And so that means that it's a weird schedule for us. It looks weird if you're in the West, right? Because you're like, well, why would you launch a phone in December? But especially your flagship, right? So, we don't know too much, obviously. We've got some renders. I'll link to the story. We got some potential specs here. It's pretty much what you expect from a flagship right now. There's really nothing too crazy going on here. 50 megapixel cameras.
Sticking to hole punch display.
Yeah, and we've got the 6.2 inch on the smaller one, which is kind of a pretty nice small size display. Maybe we'll have a more compact flagship to play with here. Which I think a lot of people want, right?
No kidding.
Let's see what else we got here. Pricing, well, the Xiaomi flagships have been really affordable, and this is India price, but we're looking at $820 for the Pro, which I think is a pretty good price. So anyway, I'll let you know when I find out more, because obviously we'll have a podcast once it becomes official. So that's not the only one. The Moto was up there. Vivo and EQ or whatever they're called, the sister brand of Vivo. I think Oppo was up there. Obviously,
they did a ton of partner cutaways.
Oh, it was crazy.
Over both
more
days,
than usual.
Yeah.
Anyway, you guys, I think I saw a story somewhere that recapped. I think it was GSM Arena that recapped every potential phone announcement. So I'll put that in the show notes. All right, let's move on to something that I think the audience is going to be really excited about. There have been some leaked renders of the Pixel Fold from
and people
Google.
have thoughts.
And oh my God. So what's your take? Are you on board with folding phones? Are you a folding phone kind of guy?
I do not carry a folding phone, but I am on board with this being the future.
Okay.
I'm just not sure, or I should say part of the future. I don't think that there's any reasonable expectation that all of our phones, even over a certain price point, are going to be foldable. Even when you factor in the flip and fold options, the hamburger and hot dog options, it's clearly going to be a thing, right? As just an option. I don't even see it as, right now, obviously, just from a cost perspective, they end up being the highest end ones, but not the highest end in terms of specs, camera and performance necessarily, but just from the display being so expensive. I think that we're going to get to a world where you've got high-end non-folding phones and high-end folding phones, and then you even have the mid-upper tier folding phones. We're still years and years away from folding being addressable at a $500 price point. But
I think we're getting there. I think that we're the flip ones, that form factor. I think I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing some $699 phones in the next couple of years. Probably not from Samsung, but maybe from some Chinese maker. Then, TCL came close to the Chicago. They never released. I think that's the price point they were aiming for. And it was a Snapdragon 765 or something. It was a mid-ranger, right? So
we've definitely reached the point where we know that the hinges and the displays are there.
Yeah. And even water resistance, which is amazing.
And there's still room. I mean, obviously, there's still room for improvement in the, the durability and in terms of the number of folds. And of course, they're going to have lower production yields, and they're going to have lower, I guess, quality standards over time. But that's addressable. That's also fine. I think the fundamentals are good enough.
I think we're there now.
Yeah.
I had Michael Fisher on last week on the show, and obviously he loves
big folding
phones.
guy.
Yeah. But what we've noticed is that there's very little competition in the flip realm with Samsung.
Yeah.
But there's a lot more competition in the tablet fold kind of experience.
Everywhere.
The Xiaomi one, the Mi Fold 2,
which is gorgeous.
Pretty amazing. Have you seen how thin that thing is? Right? Anyway.
I mean, it makes the Z Fold 4 look
like a joke, right? I know. Yeah. And then, when it's closed, it almost looks like a regular phone. Mm-hmm. I mean, then there's a Vivo one, there's an Honor one, there's a Huawei ones. So I think we're seeing more competition there. And this is where the Pixel Fold comes in, because it is one of those form factors. But here's what excites me. It looks
more like the Xiaomi.
I'm hoping they launch this, and this is real and it's happening. And because it's been on and off, right? The rumors have been, they're doing it, they're not doing it, they're doing it. Like renders don't mean anything. Like, I mean, as much as I'd love to see this myself as a Pixel user, what excites me the most about this is finally, for this market, North America, some competition in that realm that's not Samsung. Yeah. Because right now, if you look in the flip competition, is it really competition? Technically, yes, we still have the Razr 5G, right? And then the flip.
That's a technicality.
But that's a technicality because that almost doesn't count.
Yeah.
But we have zero competition on those tablet folding phones, whereas if you go to Europe right now, you can buy the Xiaomi, you can buy the Vivo. So I'm super stoked to see that. I want Google to go through with this.
I'm cautiously optimistic.
I just hope they don't mess it up.
It's silly, but the concern for me is software.
Really?
It actually is.
But
after seeing how many iterations Samsung took to start changing little things, all the basically brute forcing they have to do to make Android apps work.
The dock thing is cool.
And the dock is a great idea. But look, they didn't have the dock until this one. I mean, it took them several years to come up with the dock. And also, I mean, some of it came from hardware with making the cover screen dramatically bigger and more usable. Yeah. And in these thinner ones, like the Xiaomi and what we see in the renders here, this looks much more usable when closed, which helps a ton.
For sure.
But I don't know. It's silly to think that, or I should say it sounds silly that Google would have trouble with software in a new form factor. But we have spent a lot of time just destroying Google over how poorly they handle tablets.
Right. At the same time, as Michael was saying last week on the show about the Xiaomi, they haven't really made too much effort, except that they've kind of decided that the front is a copy of the left side of the inside of the dock.
Okay,
so
that's
basically,
clever.
It's kind of, if you rearrange the icons on the front, it's basically rearranging the one side of, and so it's actually in a way kind of works pretty well.
That's very clever.
And of course, there is support.
Samsung treats them as separate screens.
They support the whole idea of scaling up the apps and stuff as well. Right. But what's got me excited is the Oppo Find N from last year, which is supposed to be coming out with a Find N2 sometime soon. Potentially, I'm not holding my breath, but in my dream world, we would see OnePlus launching an equivalent version of that phone for this market. Because I don't know if you play with it. Shut, it's like an iPhone mini.
Yeah.
A thicker one.
Yeah.
So it's really small, really compact.
Yep.
You can get some basic stuff done. And then you open it up and it's not as big as one of those usual tablet phones. It's only like 7.2 or 7.3.
Yeah, it's not like 8
and
plus.
So now you don't really need as many of those tablet optimizations. You basically just have more screen real estate, and I actually like that.
It's like a normal size phone, but just applied to
so you just rotate it, and then you get your portrait. You can run Instagram, and it works, and you see the pictures better.
Yeah.
You get a big viewfinder when you use a camera. So I'm not saying that. Yes, ideally you'd like we'd like, based on the size of this thing, we should have some software optimizations from Google. This is Google. This is they're like the pioneer of the Android system, right? Really. Right. So they really should be giving us the goods. But I could see a world where this exists and has some kind of just basic optimizations like that, you know? So I don't know. I'm just excited that the potential of a phone that's designed for this market with the right bands and everything. That's not a kludge, you know, like the Oppo Find N was a Chinese phone and they sent it to us, all of us to review, you know, which is ballsy of them because so much can't be, you can't change the launcher. You can't change the SMS app because in China, those are locked. And, you know, I had to manually install Google Play on there. It wasn't a nightmare to do, but it was still far from a daily driver for me, right?
That ends up tainting the experience, even if you are excited about the hardware.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I totally understand the excitement from that perspective.
Yeah, that's why I'm stoked. Right. And also, you know, part of me is also still afraid because I'm like, Google has made some pretty big mistakes launching new devices, you know, like, and this is Gen 1, so hopefully it's not too bad. But then again, they've given us 2 generations of flagships now that are pretty kick-ass.
Yes, they're really good.
So anyway, we'll see how it goes.
And that's the thing. And just last thing for me is like, they're also going to continue to do non-folding pixels. You know, this like people are quoting $1,800+ for this maybe. So let's assume $1,600 to $2,000. Let's just assume it's somewhere in that range. That's not going to steal any, like, there's no overlap.
It's $1,000 more than a Pixel 7 Pro.
Right. That's not going to steal anything from a Pixel 8 Pro. You know what I mean? That's kind of, as long as it doesn't give them, you know, shiny thing syndrome and they just start focusing only on the fold.
No, I don't think they will.
Like, as long as they don't do that, it's like, great. Like, let's see, like you said, let's see a little competition for the fold in the US.
Yep.
And, you know, if it's not up to speed yet, you've got the standard Pixel line, which, like you said, is like
which is bulletproof.
It's been solid.
I mean, especially the A series. I mean, anyway, so you know, I just want to go some quick rapid fire news here before we talk about a car. So as I mentioned before, the Vivo X90 series is going to be launching on the 22nd of November. This is the flagship from Vivo with the crazy cameras and the Zeiss partnership. One of the top 5 camera phones every year is the X series from Vivo. And again, they tend to come out with a new one every 4 months. We've seen this year alone, the X70, the X80, and now the X90 Pro, or regular and a Pro, and then a Pro Plus sometimes even. And these phones have everything, and they're amazing. And I'm pretty sure this phone will have Snapdragon 8 Gen 2. So stay tuned for November 22nd. We don't really know too much. I'll put a link from Android Police on there. They have a few kind of hints of what we might see and get. I think we're going to see the 1-inch sensor. We're going to see the IMX989, which is the mother of all sensors right now. So good news. Oppo Reno series is another phone that somehow comes out every 4 months with a new version. I cannot even keep up with them. We just currently have the 8 series, which is mostly known for the Pro version having the Mary Silicon neural processor ISP enhancer, which makes for really awesome low light video, kind of like something that Snapdragon has shown us that, you know, you can do. And so, you know, now there's a Reno 9 series coming, and we're not sure what to expect. Well, what to me was interesting about the 8 Pro particularly was the Mary Silicon ISP combined with the Dimensity AT100. Because remember, the Find X5 Pro had the Mary Silicon X ISP, but it was Qualcomm 8 Gen 1. And I was like, I thought it was, they could only work with Qualcomm. But apparently it's a universal solution. So both of these phones are significant in other markets like India, Europe, and China, of course. So I just thought I'd let folks know because there's actually 3 days in a row next week. So this is 24th is the Reno, 22nd is the Vivo. But in between those two, we covered it last week. There's the folding phone from Honor on the 23rd. Yes, it's happening. So, like, if you are a Chinese phone aficionado, next week's going to be a fun week for you guys, okay? And of course, we'll go into detail next week about them. The last thing I want to talk to you about, because you're a car nerd, is, so I borrowed a Mercedes EQS AMG for the Sonoma trip last week, and it's a great car. I drove it actually a year ago in Palm Springs for a day, but I wanted to get more seat time on it, and I was like, what a great car to take to Sonoma, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's a luxury car, it's an AMG, it's fast, and it's a really great car. It feels so much sportier than the regular EQS, but it doesn't lose any of that comfort and size and the thing you'd expect from an S-Class that's an EV. But the day before I went to Sonoma, I drove the Polestar 2, and it's called the BST Edition 270, and that thing just blew my freaking mind. And it takes a lot, because I've driven them all. I've Taycan, everything. This thing drives unbelievably well.
Coming from the base of the Polestar 2, which is...
Right, so...
It's pretty pedestrian.
It's interesting, because Polestar was kind of like to Volvo what AMG and M is to, Mercedes and BMW back in the day. They would tune Volvos to be like bonkers station wagons kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Then they decided, when they got acquired by Geely, which is a Chinese parent company now that's mostly an EV maker, to, create a custom brand for the EVs. And they're like, oh, Polestar is such a great brand. Let's make cars under that brand. But they also make Volvos that are EVs, which is interesting, because they have Volvo. You can get the cars
the recharge versions.
Yeah, you can get kind of like the hybrids and the gas and the electric on the same platform, and then the Polestar is just all EV. And except for Polestar 1, which was a hybrid.
Which wasn't. But...
Right. But the Polestar 2 is, and there's a 3 coming and a 4 and 5 and 6, actually. But the current Polestar 2 is a really competent EV. It's like a competitor to the Model 3. And there is a performance model, which actually kicks good ass. But they decided to just tune one for Goodwood last year and to do the hill climb. And just, they basically said, let's Polestar the Polestar, like let's create a performance tune in factory by the best.
Put all
people
the extra
we have.
little bits on this.
Let's get all these old Volvo people that used to tune stuff for sportiness, and instead of making just a regular EV, let's get them to do something crazy. Yeah. And so they're only making 270 that are all sold out. 56 coming to the US, again, all sold out. But they did bring a couple of them to the Bay Area for us to drive. And, there's nothing different about the drivetrain. It's the same as the highest performance Polestar 2 all-wheel drive that you can drive. And the interior is the same too. You get the yellow seat belt, but it's little details they change. So the suspension is pretty much all different. And oh my God, I have never driven an EV that is this razor sharp without being hard on you.
Right.
Like, it is stiff, but it rides well.
It's really tough to do with
I
the
don't
weight
know
of an
how
EV.
they did it, but the best part is that it's using Olin dampers all the way around, that adjustable. So you can go in the front. They stole some room from the front to put the reservoirs in there.
It's the Polestar thing.
And you can adjust it. So you can change the clicks and make it stiffer, make it whatever you want, and behave differently. And it kind of gives you that tuner vibe to a platform that essentially is not really tunable, normally, right? So...
And it's just very pedestrian and commodity.
And honestly, it was such a delight to drive because it's so razor sharp. Like, I've driven, the Taycan is very good, of course, and Lucid Air is another one of my favorites for driving. But this thing, because it's a smaller car, it's a little lighter on its feet to start with, and it's got pretty good oomph in terms of performance. On top of that, this suspension setup is just unreal. Like, they did a front strut brace, also the special tires designed for that. And then they essentially used the Polestar 1 wheels, but they didn't fit. So they had to kind of made a replica of the Polestar 1 that would fit.
Okay, that's what's happening.
Little things like that. Yeah. And it, at $76,000, if you could buy one, because now you can't, it's sold out. But it's not that expensive.
No.
And I have a Model 3 Performance, and I was like, I want Polestar to tune my car.
Yeah.
Now I'm almost really tempted to go get suspension upgrades for my car, because this is wow. Just wow.
Yeah.
I drove all the other Polestars and I was like, yeah, these are nice. I would totally recommend these cars. But that thing, very special.
Just very cool. Special. Very cool that they took this approach. Like you said, the powertrain is just kind of on lock. And so let it be. If you're not going to go up to the next level of, we re-engineer this and put completely different motors in it or something, like just like the tuner approach is pretty neat, and you don't really see that with EVs.
And I think that again they pulled it off too. It's like because the balance between the sportiness and the comfort is hard to pull off.
Mm-hmm.
You know, this could be a daily driver, and you could have your kid in there and be chill, and they'd be asleep in the back seat. Your grandma would be in the passenger side. They wouldn't even know. And then you go in the carving the canyons, and you have an incredible grin on your face.
Yeah.
And you know, it's hard on an EV because you lose some engagement. You don't have a transmission to shift. You know, for those of us who like stick shift, like I personally prefer stick shift, but you know, their drivetrain is eager. They've also retuned the mapping on the accelerator pedal, so it's a little bit more oomphy. And so you can actually really kind of like adjust the car's behavior in the corners by just playing with the throttle. Like, you know, do I want to power slide a little bit or not? Then just the throttle will control it. Right. It's just fabulous. So it was under embargo last week. I couldn't talk about it. But now, like, it's out and about. So it's nice because it came out of nowhere. I was like, oh, it's going to be cool. How can it be bad? It's a Polestar. It's going to be good. But not what I expected.
Do you have any idea of how popular the Polestar 2 is? I do not see them.
You see a few of them in the Bay Area. They don't seem super popular.
Because they do kind of stand out. I mean, they have a look that is, you know, one wouldn't drive by if you're us. Right. One wouldn't drive by and you not notice it. Right. So I'm kind of surprised that I haven't seen more. I think they're kind
of like Volvos. You know, you notice if you're a car person, but you don't really notice because they're not very exciting looking if you're not.
And I'm in the Northeast, so I see a lot of Volvos. Like Volvo wagons are still very much a thing in the tri-state area. So I would have thought that maybe, and like, look, the XC60 and XC90 are like a dime a dozen. They're all over the place.
I don't think they have the volume.
Yeah. It just doesn't seem like they've moved that much.
And it runs Android Automotive, which is actually delightful because you just log in with your account.
Yeah,
and everything just comes in. It's great.
Another gas-powered Volvos, and it's fine, yeah.
Well, listen, we should wrap up. Do you want to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, your handles? I know.
Yes. You can find me at Digital Trends, although I'm not writing that much anymore. So Twitter is where it's at Andrew Martonik, Martonik.
Are you on Insta?
I am, under the same name.
Do you do like a lot of photos, or it's just a little bit?
I'm active.
Okay.
I'll say that. Not a lot of tech on there, but
okay, good. Whatever.
No. Twitter is for the mostly the tech.
You want the hot takes?
You want the hot takes and the shit posts. I got you there. And then on Insta, it's like, okay, you're going to see that we're at Snapdragon Summit, you know.
Of course, yeah.
Or, you know.
Ooh, look, Maui.
Exactly. You want to see me snowboarding this winter or running in the spring and summer? That Insta's where it's at.
There you go. Well, folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl. That's TNKGRL on both Twitter and Instagram. Think comic book character. Drop all the vowels. You get my handle. Twitter is a good place for you to hit us up, Andrew and I, about this podcast. You have some questions, some comments.
Absolutely.
And then Instagram is where you'll find pretty pictures of phones and cars and travel and food, all taken with phones. I tend to prioritize the phones. Of course, the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Pocket Casts, Spotify.
Everywhere great podcasts are found, as they say.
As you said it, exactly. And if your app lets you rate or review the show, please consider doing that. That'd be pretty awesome. There's a couple of YouTube channels right now. They're a little bit on hiatus, but those of you watching on Patreon know that you get your videos through YouTube. youtube.com/mobiletechpodcast and youtube.com/mobiletechmore. The first one is phones and wearables and personal audio. The other one is all the other stuff, basically travel tech, car tech, and home automation, all that. So there's still a bunch of videos there. I'm going to be posting more soon, so stay tuned. You know how YouTube works. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, click the little notification bell, comment. You can comment about the podcast or whatever you want. It's totally fine. You want to get more content, better content, special content, join Patreon, patreon.com/tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. You get a video version of this podcast ahead of time, about a day or two before the audio public version. You get it with video. I don't edit it as much. You'll get the swear words. You'll get a bunch of other things that might happen. So to give you an idea, the last two shows, we had an extra 10 minutes of content that I didn't put in the audio version because it was running too long. So that happens. So consider joining the Patreon. It really helps me make the show happen every week if you support me financially. So there's other tiers. There's a Discord server you can join, a bunch of stuff. So patreon.com/TNKGRL. check it out. I want to thank our sponsor today, which is Audible, as usual. Audible is awesome. They've been with us since the early days of the podcast. And if you love books and you like to read like I do, they're the number one in audiobooks, and you can't go wrong. We have a special offer. You get a 30-day free trial. You get to keep a book at the end if you stay or not. I think you'll stay once you try it out because it's so awesome. Basically, they have an incredible selection of books. Some of the books are read by the authors. They have some short form content. They have some podcasts that are exclusive to the platform. It's really affordable. And you get to try it out for 3 days without any questions asked. So please consider helping me out that way if you maybe can't do the Patreon or something. Check out audibletrial.com/mobiletech. That's the URL. That's audibletrial.com/mobiletech. And again, thanks to Audible for being our longtime sponsor. And thanks to you, Andrew.
Of course.
For being my guest on the show.
Good to be in person.
I know. And of course, thanks to Qualcomm for setting up the interview. So, folks, we'll see you next week with another show. You know that I'll have one. Stay tuned for that. And until then, cheers, everybody.
Bye.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.